Hey everyone, it's Aiden here to talk about some records today. I hope everyone watching is doing well. I've been watching a lot of your videos recently, that's been great. Other than that, I've been feeling pretty lazy, unmotivated to make my own video. But I have a big stack of stuff that's come in the mail recently that I'm excited to show off and talk about. So let's get into it. Playing in the background, in response to my Pacific Northwest video series, and if you haven't watched that yet, I'd encourage you to do so. So there's a lot of cool stuff in there that you could learn about, find your new favorite band from my locale. But I had mentioned briefly that one of the guitarists from Diminished Men, Steve Schmidt, had a side project called Ruminator that I tried to obtain with no luck. Steve actually saw my video and was kind enough to send me a few copies of the Ruminator CD, which I hope you can hear in the background, is excellent. Much in the same vein as Diminished Men. It features Steve, but it also features Dave Abramson, their drummer, killing it on this record. But as you can hear, it's quite similar, surfy rock with guitar effects. Great stuff. Really happy to finally have this on CD. So this one I've had for a couple of weeks, just now showing it. The First Clock DVA record, industrial post-punk group of sorts from the UK. This one almost has sort of a no-wave, jazzy, free improv sort of influence, along with sort of dubby, atmospheric sort of approach to punk. It's really good. It's maybe not the most memorable record in this sort of genre, but I like it. It's got a pretty good emphasis on the improvisation and skronk, and like I said, those dubby grooves, so definitely one up my alley. I really like it. It's nice and cheap, so happy to add this one to the collection. Speaking of dub, this is, quite frankly, probably my favorite dub record that I've heard so far. It's The Commandments of Dub by Jah Shaka, UK dub artist. This one's from the early 80s. It's a repress though. There it is in session. Like the lowest quality photo ever. Yeah, this is excellent. Just what I want from dub, the heavy grooves, bizarre psychedelic effects. There's this recurring sample of like a siren. It goes like woo, woo, and that's always fun. Yeah, I think I've had my fill of dub and reggae in terms of collecting for now, but yeah, this is essential in my book. Really just excellent dub record. One from South Africa, fulfilling my desire to keep adding to my African music collection. People in the BC know this one. It's the self-titled Batsumi record. I think originally released in 75 or something like that. It's a repress on a tasty red vinyl. Yeah. Not that matters, but nice touch. But yeah, this is a really good record. Definitely very in the spiritual vein. It kind of, to my ears, sounds, not to use the word derisive, but it reminds me more of music, I guess, from the African diaspora than some of these more authentic recordings that I'm getting and listening to. But not that detracts from the quality of the music or anything. Yeah, great great spiritual jazz record. Wonderful vocals, very uplifting sort of mood to it. Yeah, Batsumi. Up next we have, let's see, a couple of videos ago I showed this record by a trio featuring the guitarist Christy Doran and Chris John Coltrane 68 recommended this group, And on that note, he actually made a video chock full of recommendations specifically tailored to my taste. I was thrilled to watch that and to learn from that video. Definitely worth checking out if you've been watching my channel and somehow have not been watching his channel. There's some cool stuff in there. If you like what I've been showing, I'm sure you'll like what he shows in there. I've been especially digging the Rock and Row album that he showed. But anyway, this is which he recommended in response to my Christy Doran record, because he is also in this group, along with Liemgreuber, Dom Um Romao, who's featured on this record, a Brazilian musician, and I don't know the other players, Bobby Bury, I think is the bass player, and Freddie Studer. Actually, I do know him. I don't know what I'm talking about because he's on the other Christy Doran record. But yeah, this is really cool. I would compare it to some of the like South American fusion sort of records, like Hermeto Pascual. Definitely has that kind of vibe of channeling like Miles Davis era fusion, but mixing that with Brazilian percussion. And I don't know if they go quite into like a samba sort of vibe anywhere in here, but I will say, this group is classified as European free jazz. I don't really hear that influence on this record. In fact, I've actually seen the saxophonist on here, Urs Liemgreuber, play, and I have to say his sound, not that it's bad in any way, but it's definitely more commercial, if you will, than anything he was doing the night I saw him. He's definitely become a force to be reckoned with among European improv players on the soprano saxophone. And this one's not a recent arrival. I actually bought this from him last year when I saw him perform in town at the Alternative Library. But this is an improv group he leads with Jacques Demierre, Barre, Phillips, Thomas Lehn. I actually don't know that's accurate to say he leads it. It seems like they're a collective focused on deep listening, really, as they play. It was interesting kind of talking to him about his philosophy on improvisation and how it all kind of just stems from listening, really, and really tuning into the sounds being produced and the sort of biofeedback loop of reacting to that. And to hear that in this group setting with Liemgreuber on saxophone, Demierre plays piano, Barre Phillips, of course, famous upright bass player, and Thomas Lehn plays analog synthesizer. This one's fantastic for deep listening, free improv. Lots of great sounds on here, very sparse, and again, just more rewarding the more you're able to pay attention to it. Great record from last year. Now to sort of segue from the Brazilian tip of that record, one of my personal favorite Brazilian records, a reissue, because there's no way I could ever afford the original. I mean, I could, but I don't want to spend that money on an original. Todos Os Olhos, definitely my favorite Tom Zé record. His weirdest that I've heard, definitely kind of on the avant folk tip. And his guitar playing on here honestly reminds me of some of like Alvarius B or Bill Orcutt's scrumpier acoustic moments to a degree. I mean, it doesn't go quite that far out, but being a big fan of those guys, I do have that kind of frame of reference here. But yeah, beyond that, it's just great stripped back folk music. I mean, all these songs really are based around percussion, guitar, and voice. I think that's all there is to it, really. But yeah, brilliant stuff, and an essential Brazilian record in my book. One that I learned about from Sherv, Julius Jabbar's channel. I was watching one of his older videos, and he ended up putting this one on in the background, and it was one of those things where it's like, okay, I've gotta have that record. Red Square, rare and lost 70s recordings. It's basically exactly that. It's an archival release. The A-side is some studio recordings. The B-side is actually a gig opening for Henry Cow. And yeah, this is some extraordinary, skronky free rock based around a trio of saxophone, guitar, and drums. Way up my alley. I love this kind of stuff, especially when it's coming from a time before you would think anybody was doing this kind of thing. Yeah, definitely comparable to, I mean, not as far out as like Taka Yanagi or Derek Bailey's recordings, but maybe more comparable to like, I don't know if anybody knows this record. Actually, I think I've seen it around a few times, but there's this record called Daily Dance by Doug Snyder and Bob Thompson. It's just a duo of guitar and drums. It's totally freeform. It's from the early 70s, and yeah, I remember discovering that record and just realizing how far ahead of its time it was really to do something like that. So I always seek out records doing that sort of thing, and this is a very fine example of that. Quite excellent. Next, we just have an essential weird record. The Residents, Duck Stab. Been after this one for quite a while. Finally just found a super cheap copy and snagged it up. One among my favorite Residents records. Probably not the favorite, but an essential one in my book. Got a ton of great songs on it. You got Constantinople, Bach is Dead, one of my favorites. Skinny, of course, and The Electrocutioner is actually a really good song too. What else? Oh, Sinister Exaggerator. Yeah, great stuff. Good for more of their songs. I think I prefer more of the conceptual side of the Residents. Like Eskimo is probably my favorite, or I really like Gone in 3 Persons as well. But just for their early weirdness. Take on experimental pop music. Can't go wrong with Duck Stab. Great record. I was hoping this one would have arrived for my last video because I had a bunch of other Swedish stuff, and I just would have really satisfied the aesthetic fascist in me, but oh well. Zamla, Mammaz, Manna, Schlagerns, Mystik, or for Aldre, Nybegynnare. No one can critique my pronunciations there, that's fine. But Zamla, Mammaz, Manna, of course, is probably my favorite Swedish group overall. And this is probably my favorite record by them. The A-side is really wacky. Almost has like this playful, not really nursery rhyme kind of vibe, but almost like innocent, childish, weird folk music kind of vibe, but obviously through their own filter. It's a bit absurd. Hey, there's a song, I don't know the lyrics, but there's a song where it almost sounds like it's about Hitler and Himmler. Great subject matter there, but and then the B-side features Odette, which is like this long 17-minute piece of theirs. It's a great avant-prog piece with bits of improvisation in the middle of it. It's a fun one for me to kind of play on bass. I've picked up parts of that one. And then the second disc is really what makes this set for me, though, because it's, as far as I can tell, it's all improv, or, you know, very loose structure if there is any, but man, these guys could improvise. I love hearing, especially progressive rock bands or jazz musicians, of course, just letting, you know, fuck writing music, let's just improvise, you know. I love it when bands do that, and they've got a full disc of it here. You know, of course that sort of thing shows up here and there on other Zamla Mammaz records, but a whole disc of that is just, I don't know, I love that kind of stuff. I love hearing bands just, you know, especially when it's a band that does do the song thing, but a band to just throw all that away and just improvise. Love it. So, very happy to add this one to the collection. Schlagerns Mystik, Aldre, Nybegynnare. Great stuff. Another Swedish artist that didn't make it for the last video. Who cares? Catherine Christer Hennix, who was a student of Lamont Young and kind of Nath. Swedish musician, I think I said that. Drone music of a lot of varieties. She plays a variety of instruments. I think piano primarily, could be mistaken. On here, though, she plays the oboe, actually. And has two fellows playing the sarangi with her, which, if you don't know, is an Indian bowed instrument. And they create quite a unique sounding drone here. This is one of the better drone-based records I've heard in quite a while, and this was a mini obsession of mine for, I don't know, maybe a week or so, a couple weeks ago. Now I'm over it in the records here, but it's still brilliant stuff, and I love this packaging too. This is on Blank Forms, the label who did that Masayuki Takayanagi reissue that I love so dearly. And they have more stuff from him, more stuff from Catherine Christer Hennix coming out. Yeah, they're doing great work, and this is highly recommended by me if you like drone music at all. Really great texture on this one. Sort of in a similar vein, I got a bit obsessed with Indian music, because of course it's largely drone-based music with improvisation over it, and I wanted to branch out into players other than Ravi Shankar, who of course I have and have shown, but I don't have really anybody other than Shankar from India. And I've got a box set of his that also features Ali Akbar Khan. But, yeah, I got deeper into some other players, other styles, even. So, I got two records by this guy, Ustad Zia Mohiuddin Dagar. I think the Ustad is some sort of title, and his name's just Zia Dagar. He is a Rudra Veena player. The Rudra Veena essentially being to the sitar what a bass guitar is to a bass, so it has a lower register, lower frequency, and that's what really makes these records for me. Is the Raga goes through a few phases, and I guess in this style called Drupad, the emphasis is more on the alap, the beginning of the Raga, and let's see. On this particular session, that's like half of the piece. It's basically the entire first disc is just in that mode. I don't know too much about how the Raga system works, but I know that listening to it on here, it's just like, oh, brilliant. But from what I can tell, the alap is more of like a slower sort of section, and he has heavy emphasis on lower register of his instrument during those sections, and it just sounds so brilliant. Let's take a look at this other one. And look at the way he's bending those notes. So it really creates that effect they call the cluster or constellation of notes in Indian music, which is where you're able to access all these microtonal territories between the notes by bending the strings like that. And yeah, I've never heard anybody bend strings the way this guy bends strings. It's quite brilliant stuff, and quite inspiring to me. His use of the lower frequencies as a bass player is just like, oh man, I kind of want to figure out how to do that kind of shit on the bass. Great stuff, and really great packaging. So if you can't tell, this is on Stephen O'Malley's Ideologic Organ label. Really nicely put together. Ton of info on the inside I haven't gotten to yet. Nice photographs. Great pickups. I'm happy with those. And then the other Indian musician I've spent more time with, I was already familiar with his work. I just never had any of his records. So I picked up this set of live performances at the Palace Theatre of Pandit Pramnath, who I mentioned just a moment ago as being a teacher of Catherine Christer Hennix, and of course worked with Lamont Young, Terry Riley here on this record, supporting Pramnath. And if you don't know Pramnath, he is a vocalist performing in that same Drupad style, which is distinct from the more popular Indian vocal styles, which I've never, not that I've never liked it, but I've never liked it as much as this style, and I don't know that anybody else does this. It seems like Pramnath was kind of the last of his kind doing this kind of music, and it's brilliant stuff. He has a deep voice and uses it as a sort of drone instrument, really, but also explores the microtonal areas between notes the way you would with any other Indian instrument, and it's brilliant stuff, must-hear stuff. And of course, if you haven't heard Lamont Young and Terry Riley's other work and the obvious influence this had on it, check all that stuff out. It's great. And then sort of related to that sort of modern classical take on, meditative music, bringing in South Asian influences, we have one of my favorite Stockhausen records, Ceylon, Bird of Passage. And this one, he plays this sort of Indian drum, which he calls a candy drum. Yeah, candy with a K. I'm not too familiar with what this is, but it definitely resembles drums that I've seen in Indonesian music. It looks maybe a bit bigger than the merdungum, and it doesn't sound like the merdungum. He doesn't play it like that, so I don't know what kind of drum it actually is. I don't know if candy drum is actually an ethnographic term, but that aside, there's obvious influences of Indian music here, or at least to my ears, it seems quite obvious. Or actually, it talks about it here. He was specifically studying, Sinhalese music of India, and wrote the piece Ceylon based on that, which features electronium, various percussion, synthesizer, modulated piano, tam-tam, of course. And then the B-side is quite interesting too, because it's got Marcus Stockhausen on trumpet. It almost has this abstract take on like fusion era Miles to my ears. Like it's interesting. It's almost like his take on fusion. Of course, I don't know what was actually going through his head when he made this music or any of this music, but that's just what my ears would sort of compare it to. A pretty interesting, unique album, and he's discography. And, you know, it's got plenty of electronic bleeps and bloops, too, so it's a fun one. Definitely highly recommend it. Stockhausen record, maybe a bit more accessible and diverse than some of his other recordings. Quite good. Also from Germany, another reissue on Wawa that I picked up. Another one from the Nurse with Wound list. Next is Quam with BZ Hungen. This one is really cool. Quite like that other one I showed, Anima Sound. It's a prog rock record of sorts, but with a heavy emphasis on free improvisation and of jazz too. There's a lot of saxophone on this record. And it kind of gives me a vibe like this cover, you know, it's got like a spaced out sound, but it doesn't sound so heavy with the space rock kind of sound. It almost sounds more like folk music from space. So, you know, kind of imagine it like this cover, I suppose, you know, some sort of fun communal music making in space. Good album. Good, I should say. Excellent. It's great. And last year, probably my favorite Sun Ra record. If not, it was certainly the first one I heard. Crystal Spears. I remember, I think I would have been 15 or 16, finding the 2-disc set at the library because it was only available on CD for a long time. Crystal Spears, and I can't remember the other disc it was coupled with. It was never as memorable as Crystal Spears to me. Yeah, the electronics on this record are fantastic. I mean, it starts with this sort of just spastic, how does it, yeah, jagged spears of crystal thrust into the brain is how it describes the opening of this record on the back, and that's kind of always how I've heard it. Yeah, just immediately colorful with the electronic textures, and it doesn't settle into a structure really at all with the first track, which was immediately appealing to me. It was sort of what I was looking for at the time, and I don't think I'd really heard anybody do music like that at the time. So it was definitely an ear-opening experience for me first hearing this, and thrilled to have it on vinyl because it's always been a favorite of mine when it comes to Sun Ra. Yeah, it's like a lot of the other records I've listened to of him, I've always been kind of, you know, chasing that dragon, you know, looking for one that affects me the way this one does. Yeah, and of course you got Sunrise in the Western Sky on the backside, which is another sprawling improvisation. The Eternal Sphinx is really the only one with sort of a structure to it, and even that one gets pretty far out. And then The Embassy of the Living God is another fantastic track. Marshall Allen really lets loose on that track. And yeah, it was definitely the most abrasive sounds I had heard at the time. I was a metalhead still when I looked into this, but I think the extremity of metal music and, you know, looking for more extreme sounds sonically, I think it really primed me for this and a lot of other stuff. And I don't listen to so much metal these days because if it's not that interesting or even harsh or extreme or any of the things that I would look for in heavy metal. Yeah, all that aside, this has been a favorite for a long time. And I'm thrilled to add it to my meager Sun Ra collection. Compared, of course, to the hundreds of albums he's put out. But yeah, this is, of the dozen or so I've heard, this has always been my favorite. So there it is. That's what I've been listening to physically lately, just stuff that's been showing up mostly. Beyond that, I've mostly just been trying to discover new things as always. So yeah, I didn't mean to let this one go on for so long. We're at 30 minutes. Groovy. Well, I've spoken enough. I've shown you enough music for today. So I hope you're all doing well. I'll keep tuning into all your videos, because that's a great way to pass time here in quarantine. And until next time, see ya.